Okay, so step number three. Step number three is identify the urgent problems. So we've spoken about this in previous videos. We want to know what urgent problems exist in our niche. Why? So we can build our avatar around that problem, okay? And only those types of problems. This is what's going to set us up for massive success. So for example, we don't want to target people with slightly elevated blood pressure. We want to target people who have severely clogged arteries. This is a critical point for you to understand. Otherwise, you're just not going to hit the ball out of the park. You're not going to hit the bullseye here. So, as I mentioned in previous videos, there's three jobs here. Job number one is to identify the most motivated buyer in your niche. Job number two is to identify his or her wants, needs, desires, fears, frustrations, and problems as it relates to that urgent problem. And then the third thing that we got to do is create the avatar. So in terms of identifying the most motivated buyer in our niche, the most motivated buyer in the niche will always be the person with the most urgent problem. Okay? Again, the definition of an urgent problem is a problem where there are serious repercussions associated with not solving it now. Like if we wait, if we delay, there are serious repercussions associated with doing that. So in order to identify the urgent problems, you got to begin by researching the advertising you have found. Now, we're 3 steps into this. It's very important that you understand these steps are sequential. Don't do step 4 first, and step 2 second. Do step 1 first. Do step 2 second. Do step 3 third, and so on and so forth, because each step sets you up for the next step. Okay, so step 3 is identify the urgent problems. How do you do that? You research the advertising that you have found. Go through all of the winning advertising that you have found with an understanding that you're looking for urgent problems. What urgent problems are being solved here? Or that solutions are being promised to here. And identify all of those urgent problems. Then research posts inside the groups and look for urgent problems. Okay? Only look for urgent problems. Again, yes, having elevated blood pressure is a problem, but it's not an urgent problem. It's not something that needs to be solved today, or else something deadly is going to happen. Something bad might happen, but it's way off in the future. And therefore, it's something that is not urgent. So there's a big difference between a problem and an urgent problem. Elevated blood pressure, problem. 90% blockage in the coronary artery, urgent problem. So we want to identify urgent problems. So when you're inside your group, these groups, and you're doing your research, there's going to be an overwhelming quantity of problems. And you need to sift through those problems real quick and just identify which ones are urgent. There we go. Identify the most urgent problems that people have. Then what you want to do is you want to find out what the wants, needs, desires, fears, frustrations, and problems are around that urgent problem. Okay? So, for example, the parenting niche. So many problems in the parenting niche. Behavioral problems, learning problems, nutritional problems, kids not wanting to eat, healthy meals. They just want to go and eat McDonald's all the time. Teenagers who are abusing drugs. So, variety of different problems in the parenting niche. Let's just take teenagers who are abusing drugs. Very urgent problem. Very urgent. very serious repercussions associated with not solving that problem. And the longer that problem goes on, the more serious the repercussions become. Urgent problem. Definition of an urgent problem. That's an urgent problem. So if you've identified that as your urgent problem, and you're now researching your advertising, or you're researching posts in your group or whatever, and you find out that there's a problem, and one of the problems is that like kids are not eating nutritious meals. Instead, they just want to eat McDonald's foods. That's not going to be going into any want, need, desire, fear, frustration, or problem category in your avatar. Why? Because it's unrelated. It's not related. Parents of kids, of teenagers who are abusing drugs, the last freaking thing that's on their mind is getting their kids to, getting those teenagers to eat some healthy meals instead of McDonald's. Why? Because it's the problem of abusing drugs eclipses, and pushes out any interest that the parent might have in in nutrition for the kids. So talking about that kind of stuff in your advertising, is not relevant to what it is that that this person is going through. So the point I'm making is the wants, needs, desires, fears, frustrations, and problems that you go and find, that you research and get the answers to, they all must be aligned with the urgent problem. Otherwise, you're going to start talking about things in your copy that's going to bore your prospect to tears and potentially lose them. And so many advertisers make this mistake. They have this massive broad view of the market and they try to sell to everybody, and as a result they end up like murdering their conversion rates because they're just losing more and more and more people at different points in time in their advertising. So you want to make sure that when you're researching the wants, needs, desires, fears, frustrations, and problems, that all of those things are as they relate to the urgent problem. So if your urgent problem is, teenagers that are abusing drugs, and you're talking to parents about it, whatever the wants, the items in the wants section are, they better be the wants of a parent who has a teenager that's abusing drugs. Whatever items you put in the needs section, they better be the needs of a parent who has a teenager that's abusing drugs. It's so important that you get that right, because what we want is every last sentence in our advertising to be landing like lightning for the prospect. But if we're missing, what's going to end up happening is, to give you a dramatic example, we're going to be talking about cats to people who are interested in dogs. The conversation gets old and lame real fast, and people just disconnect and disappear. This is a huge thing. You don't want that to be the case. You want to be talking about everything that is relevant to the prime prospect that you are targeting, and you don't want to be talking to that person about cats if what they're interested in is dogs. Very, very powerful point. Very important point. I mentioned this earlier. Ask lots of questions inside the groups. You're not going to just go into these groups and all of a sudden, there's going to be a post that's going to tell you all the wants, and another post that's going to tell you all the needs, and another one that tells you all the desires and the fears and the frustrations and the problems. That's not how this works. You're going to find bits and pieces. Excuse me, my voice is breaking. You're going to find bits and pieces. But you're going to have to fill in the gaps. And how you fill in the gaps is you ask lots of questions. You ask lots and lots of questions. Hey guys, what's the biggest frustration you have with being a parent of a teen who's abusing drugs? Can you see how a question like that can give you exactly the answer that you're looking for? Like, you need to ask mega, mega, mega direct questions, and lots of those questions. And make sure that whatever the answers you're going to get are exactly the answers that you need. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to ask, poor quality questions. I ask poor quality questions all the time. But as a result of asking those poor quality questions, I understand what's needed for me to ask a better quality question. So ask lots and lots and lots and lots of questions. And if anybody, like I had a client who I brought through this process, and he was like, what if people ask me, why am I asking these questions? What do I say? Just say you're doing some research. Like, who cares? And he's like, well, what if they throw me out of the group? And I said, look, there's two answers to that. Number one, I've been doing this for years. I've never been thrown out of a group. Number two, let's say you get thrown out of a group. How does that impact your physical health? How does it impact your financial status? How does it impact your marriage? How does it impact your family? How does it impact your kids? It doesn't impact anything at all. So who freaking cares? If you get kicked out of a group, who cares? What have you got to lose? Doesn't matter. But I've never been kicked out of a group. I've never actually been asked, why are you asking these questions? But if someone was to ask me, hey, why are you asking these questions? My response would be, I'm just doing some research. So ask lots of questions in the group. You've got nothing to lose. And lastly, start conversations with people who reply. If you ask, what's your biggest frustration being the parent of a teenager who's abusing drugs, and you get like 50 people who reply, that's your exact prospect. So get into conversations with that person, with those people. Ask lots of questions. Like, you are now having a direct conversation with your prime prospect, and your prospect is opening up to you and telling you things, and you're in conversation. You can ask tons and tons and tons of questions there. So start conversations with people who reply. Don't ask just one question. Ask as many questions as you possibly can. I remember when I was doing this with Halbert, he used to say to me, don't be the first person to exit the call. Don't exit the call. Keep talking until the person runs you off the phone. Because the whole idea is, the longer you talk and you can communicate with your prospect, the more information you can learn. So start conversations with people who reply, and keep going, keep asking more and more and more and more questions, and get what you need. This is the advantage of this stuff. You can go into a Facebook group, ask a question, in 24 hours you could have 200-300 answers. You'd have to pick up the phone. When I was doing this with Halbert, you'd have to pick up the phone and call like 400 or 500 people to get 200 people on the phone. And then you'd have to have long conversations. The whole process used to take weeks. But now with Facebook groups, you can just communicate with hundreds of people in a flash and get these answers in a flash. This is a really, really massive unfair advantage in the marketplace. It really is. And, this stuff is so powerful. It's really like my secret weapon here. So that's step number 3. Identify the urgent problems in your niche. And then once you've figured out those urgent problems, find out the wants, needs, desires, fears, frustrations, and problems around those urgent problems. This is very, very powerful stuff. This is what's going to help you, A, target the most motivated buyer in your niche, and B, be able to speak to that person, to understand that person to such a deep degree that when you offer them something, they're going to buy like crazy, because it's exactly what it is that they want, need, desire. It's exactly the solution to their fears, their frustrations, and their problems. So they're going to take out their credit card and buy from you with reckless abandon because you know them so well. Very powerful stuff. See you in step number 4.